The vast darkness of space stretched endlessly, dotted with distant stars that flickered like tiny candles in a limitless night. Somewhere far beyond Earth's orbit, a massive alien fleet drifted silently, a ghostly shadow among the stars. These ships, once symbols of power and pride for their civilization, now floated aimlessly. Their engines were damaged, their communication systems flickering, and their hulls scarred from a failed hyperspace jump that had gone terribly wrong. The fleet's leaders gathered in the bridge of the largest ship, their faces pale with worry. They were used to commanding legions, but now, stranded in an unforgiving void, they felt helpless. Admiral Kale of the Arinthian fleet stood before the central view screen, gazing at the scattered ships around him. Some vessels had already drifted out of formation, their lights dimming as power failed. The silence was heavy, broken only by the low hum of emergency systems struggling to keep life support running. The Arinthians were not used to silence like this. They were a race built on movement, strategy, and strength, yet here they were, suspended in a void where no one could help them. "Status report," Kyle demanded, his voice steady but carrying a hint of urgency. "Engines are offline on over 70% of the fleet," replied Commander Rena, her eyes scanning the holographic displays. "Life support is holding, but supplies will last only a few weeks. Communications with our homeworld are jammed. We are truly alone." A murmur of fear passed through the officers gathered in the bridge. It was rare for the Arinthians to admit fear, even among themselves. Yet the truth of their situation pressed heavily on every mind. They had trained for battles, for tactical retreats, for defending their empire, but not for drifting helplessly in the cold nothing of space. Kyle took a deep breath. "We must remain calm. Panic will accomplish nothing." He walked slowly along the bridge, observing the crew. "We have survived long odds before. We will survive this." But even as he spoke, the words felt hollow. Outside, the endless black of space seemed to press against the fleet like a living force. Meteoroids occasionally passed near the ships, small sparks of danger in the void, yet nothing to threaten the fleet outright. Still, the emptiness was suffocating. Time seemed to stretch without meaning, each moment a reminder that they were trapped. In one of the smaller vessels, a young officer named Lyra floated near the observation window. Her hands pressed against the cool glass as she watched the stars drift slowly past. She was not yet hardened by war or command, and the helplessness of the situation weighed heavily on her. "Why did this happen?" she whispered to herself, almost as if the stars might answer. "Why now when we are so far from home?" Her companion, an older navigator named Orion, shook his head. "Mistakes happen, Lyra. Even the best fleets can falter. Hyperspace travel is unforgiving. We drift because of a small miscalculation, a ripple in the calculations, and now we must survive it." His voice was calm, though his eyes betrayed the same worry that Lyra felt. Back on the flagship, Admiral Kale convened a council of the fleet's top leaders. They discussed their options, but each plan seemed impossible. Repairing the engines would take weeks, and they lacked the proper materials. Attempting to reach the nearest star system would be a gamble, and any attempt at long-range communication had so far failed. Even the idea of sending scouts ahead felt risky, as each ship in the fleet was barely operational. Kale's mind returned again and again to the thought of their isolation. "We have no allies nearby. No one will find us," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "We must rely on our own strength." And hope, however, was fragile. As the fleet drifted in the void, the crew began to feel the strain of endless days without real progress. Food and water were rationed, each meal a reminder that time was slipping away. Sleep became difficult, for the constant hum of damaged engines and flickering lights prevented rest. The isolation began to wear on even the strongest minds. On one bridge, a communications officer named Terrell sat at his console, trying again to send a distress signal. He typed in coordinates and messages repeatedly, hoping for a response from some distant civilization. Hours passed. Days passed. Still nothing. Not even a faint signal in reply. The emptiness seemed to mock them. Yet amid the fear, small acts of resilience appeared. Crew members helped one another repair damaged systems, sharing tools and knowledge across ranks. Lyra found herself assisting the engineers, offering ideas and quick thinking that surprised even the veterans. Orion worked alongside the navigation team, recalculating paths in hopes of finding a natural gravitational pull or drift. that might carry them closer to help. One night, as the fleet floated silently past a distant asteroid field, Kale walked alone along the corridors of the flagship. He paused to look at the stars through the large observation window. The emptiness pressed on him, but he noticed a faint glimmer, a tiny point of light that did not belong to the fleet. Another ship? He wondered aloud. The light was distant, moving slowly, but it was not part of their own formation. He called for a sensor sweep. "Scan that light immediately." The results were inconclusive. "Unknown signature, Admiral," the sensor officer replied. "Too far to identify. No weapons, no engines detected, but it is definitely moving." Kel's heart beat faster. Could it be an enemy? A pirate fleet? Or perhaps another stranded civilization as desperate as they were? The thought of any other being in the void was both terrifying and hopeful. Back in the smaller ships, Lyra and Orion watched the distant light with mixed emotions. "Do you think it's help?" Lyra asked. Orion shrugged. "We cannot know. But even a small possibility of rescue is worth holding on to. Hope is a fragile thing, but it is better than despair." As days turned into weeks, the fleet continued its slow, quiet drift. Engineers patched what they could, crews maintained life support, and officers tried to keep morale from crumbling. Yet the question of the unknown light lingered in every mind. Was there anyone out there in this immense emptiness willing to offer help? Or were they truly alone, destined to become nothing more than drifting ghosts in space? Then one morning, sensors aboard the flagship picked up an anomaly. A fleet approaching, but it was not an Orinthian fleet. It moved differently, with precision but unfamiliar technology. The lights reflected brightly against the void, showing signs of advanced engineering unlike anything the Orinthians had ever seen. Kale stared at the display, disbelief and cautious hope filling his chest. "Prepare a message," he ordered. "Send a greeting. We may not be alone after all." The officers exchanged wary glances. Could it be possible that in the vast emptiness of space help had arrived? Could a civilization exist that would aid them rather than exploit their weakness? The possibility was almost too good to believe. Yet for the first time since the failed jump, a spark of hope lit the hearts of the stranded Orinthians. As the mysterious fleet drew closer, the stranded ships trembled slightly from the gravitational effects of so many massive vessels moving together. Crew members whispered to one another, some with fear, others with cautious excitement. The void was no longer silent. It hummed with potential, with change. Admiral Kale returned to his command chair, gazing at the approaching lights. He knew that the coming encounter could reshape the fate of his fleet forever. The Orinthians had survived wars, cosmic storms, and interstellar rivalries. But surviving the vast emptiness alone had tested them in ways they had never imagined. And now, at the edge of despair, there was a glimmer of something new, something they had not dared to hope for. The silent armada, stranded and vulnerable, waited, and humanity, though unknown to them, was about to change everything. The distant lights that Admiral Kale had glimpsed were no longer tiny points in the void. They grew larger, brighter, moving with precise formation, unlike anything the Orinthians had seen before. The unknown fleet was approaching steadily, their ships sleek and unfamiliar. Sensors aboard the flagship buzzed with activity as crews tried to analyze the strange vessels. "Admiral," said Commander Rena, her voice tight with curiosity, "these ships, their technology is advanced. But it is different. I cannot match it to any records in the Orinthian archives." Kale's eyes never left the view screen. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. "Keep scanning," he ordered. "We need to know if they are friend or foe." The unknown fleet maintained its steady approach. Then, without warning, a clear message appeared on the Orinthian communication channels. The language was strange, the symbols unfamiliar, but the meaning was unmistakable. Someone was trying to communicate. Rena leaned over the console, translating the symbols with her knowledge of universal communication protocols. "It's a greeting," they say. "We come to help." Kyle felt a rush of relief that nearly took his breath away. For weeks his fleet had drifted helplessly, isolated and desperate. The prospect of help was almost too good to believe. "Prepare a reply," he said, his voice firm. "Tell them, we are stranded in need of assistance." The crew worked quickly, sending a carefully constructed message through the communication channels. Kale watched the response time stretch painfully long. But then the unknown fleet replied almost immediately, confirming they would come closer to offer aid. on one of the smaller vessels. Lyra floated near a viewport, her eyes wide with amazement.
"Did you see that, Orin?"
she whispered. They said, "They are coming to help us." Orin smiled faintly, though his mind was still cautious. "Yes, Lyra, but remember, hope is fragile. We must be ready for anything. Still, this is a sign that we are not completely alone." As the hours passed, the human fleet, though the Arinthians did not yet know their species, moved closer. The ships were massive but elegant, reflecting light off their polished hulls. The designs were unfamiliar yet purposeful, built for long journeys across the stars. Sensors revealed structures that seemed to hum with quiet energy, engines that radiated efficiency rather than raw power. Kale called a council meeting on the flagship. Officers and engineers crowded into the large room, all eyes on him. "We are about to meet another civilization," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "We do not know them, and we do not know their intentions. But for now they offer aid. We must proceed carefully, and with respect." The Arinthians had long been taught that humility before strangers was a rare skill. They were a proud race used to dominance and command. Yet, as Kale looked at the fleet through the main view screen, he felt a sense of humility rising within him. Their lives, the lives of everyone in the stranded armada, were now in the hands of beings they had never met. Finally, the human ship slowed and formed a protective perimeter around the drifting Arinthian fleet. Small craft separated from the main vessels and approached slowly, scanning the Arinthian ships with advanced sensors. Crew members watched in tense silence. Every moment was a test of patience and trust. Then a human shuttle docked with the flagship. A series of airlocks cycled, and finally a small team of humans stepped aboard. They moved confidently yet carefully, aware of the tension in the Arinthian crew. Kale met them personally on the docking platform. The humans were unlike any being he had seen. They were taller than most Arinthians, with soft features and intelligent eyes. Their uniforms were simple, practical, and carried no insignia of aggression. Each member of the team carried tools, devices, and small containers that hummed with energy. One of the humans stepped forward. "Greetings," he said, his voice calm and clear. "We received your distress signal. We are here to help. My name is Commander Elias, and this is my team. We do not seek conflict. We only wish to assist your fleet." A murmur ran through the Arinthian officers. The language was foreign, but translation devices had already converted their words into the Arinthian tongue. Kale studied Elias closely. The human's demeanor was open, calm, and confident. There was no hidden threat, no hint of dominance, only genuine concern. "Commander Elias," Kyle said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of relief. Thank you. We are stranded, our engines are damaged, and supplies are low. We do not know how long we can last without help." Elias nodded. "We understand. We have experience in repairs and logistics. We will work with your crew to stabilize your fleet. Together we can restore your ships and provide you with necessary supplies." Over the next few hours, humans and Arinthians worked side by side. Humans moved with quiet efficiency, their knowledge of engineering remarkable. They approached alien technology not with fear, but with curiosity and careful observation. They asked questions, studied systems, and quickly adapted their tools to fit the Arinthian ships. Lyra watched in awe as humans dismantled damaged engine cores and replaced them with precise, efficient parts. They are amazing," she whispered to Orin. "They understand our technology faster than anyone we've trained with." Orin nodded, impressed despite himself. "Yes, but notice how patient they are. They do not rush. They do not criticize. They only focus on solving the problem. That is something rare." Kyle walked through the fleet, observing humans interacting with his crew. There were moments of humor as humans attempted to pronounce alien names, and laughter from shared mistakes as adjustments were made. Yet beneath it all was a sense of respect and collaboration. The Arinthians had long considered themselves superior in strategy and technology. But these humans approached every problem with intelligence, creativity, and most importantly, kindness. Days passed, and slowly the fleet's condition began to improve. Ships that had been drifting helplessly were now powered, life support stabilized, and navigation systems repaired. Engineers worked around the clock, humans teaching Arinthians new methods of efficiency and repair. The air was filled with a quiet excitement, a sense of possibility that had been absent for so long. Even the crew's morale began to shift. Lyra found herself helping the humans in ways she never thought possible. She learned new methods of repair, new approaches to problem-solving, and perhaps most importantly, how to work as part of a team that respected each member equally. Then came the first test of cooperation beyond repairs. Sensors detected a natural phenomenon, a passing cosmic storm that threatened to push some of the smaller ships off course. Human and Orinthian crews worked together to calculate safe trajectories, adjusting engines and shields in perfect harmony. The storm passed without incident, and the crews celebrated quietly, understanding that this was more than a technical success. It was proof that trust was building. Kale watched from the flagship's bridge as humans coordinated the efforts with a calm efficiency that inspired confidence. For the first time since their isolation began, he felt a genuine sense of hope. Perhaps, he thought, our survival was never meant to be alone. Perhaps it was meant for us to meet others who see value in helping rather than conquering. As the sun of a distant system glinted across the hulls, Kale called a meeting with Commander Elias. The two leaders spoke openly about the fleet, their respective capabilities, and the challenges that lay ahead. Your people, they are extraordinary, Kale said, feeling genuine admiration. Elias smiled faintly. We are not extraordinary. We are curious, persistent, and willing to help. That is all, but perhaps that is enough. For the first time in weeks, Kale felt a sense of peace. Humanity, though unknown to most of the Orinthians before now, had shown up not with weapons, not with demands, but with the simple determination to help. And in the void of space where hope had been nearly lost, that was more powerful than any fleet of warships. As night fell across the drifting fleet, stars reflected off the human ships in a brilliant display. The Orinthians looked at them not with suspicion or fear, but with growing respect. They had survived many battles, many wars, but surviving together, across species, across cultures, was a lesson they would never forget. Kyle knew that the days ahead would be challenging. Repairs were far from complete, and the journey home was still long. But for now, stranded no longer, the Orinthians could breathe freely. They had allies, they had friends, and they had hope. Humanity had arrived, and with their arrival, the silent armada found a spark of life once more. The days following the humans' arrival passed quickly, but the work was far from over. While the fleet's engines were partially restored and life support stabilized, many ships were still fragile. Crew members moved with careful precision, ensuring every repair and adjustment was perfect. The humans worked tirelessly, offering guidance and expertise, and the Orinthians slowly began to learn new ways to maintain their technology. Admiral Kale stood on the bridge of the flagship, observing the combined fleet. The once silent armada now hummed with energy and activity. Orinthians and humans moved side by side, sharing tools, ideas, and stories. The presence of humanity had lifted the weight of isolation, replacing it with collaboration and hope. Kyle, Commander Rena said, stepping up beside him. The engineers report that we have restored engines to nearly 60% of the fleet. With your permission, we can begin coordinated testing tomorrow. Kyle nodded. Proceed, but maintain caution. A partially repaired fleet is vulnerable, and we must ensure safety above all. He turned to watch Lyra, who floated between the human and Orinthian engineers, helping where she could. Her youthful enthusiasm was infectious, and Kyle could see that she was learning more in a few days than she had in months of traditional training. Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, human and Orinthian crews faced a particularly stubborn problem. One of the larger ships, the Solaris, had suffered heavy engine damage. Orinthian engineers had tried several methods to restart it, but the results were minimal. Commander Elias observed quietly, letting his team work with the Orinthians. This is a complex system, he said finally, pointing to a series of interlinked circuits, but it's not beyond repair. We need to reroute power temporarily, stabilize the main conduit, and then carefully recalibrate the drive core. An Orinthian engineer frowned. That is risky. We have never rerouted a system like this. One mistake could overload the engine. Elias smiled. Sometimes risk is necessary, but calculated risk, yes, that is manageable. Over the next few hours, human and Orinthian engineers worked together. Lyra assisted eagerly, following Elias's instructions while using her knowledge of Orinthian technology. Sweat glistened on foreheads, tools clicked and hummed, and slowly, the Solaris's engines began to respond. The ship shuddered, then vibrated steadily, a sign that the repairs were holding. "Excellent," Elias said, clapping a hand on Lyra's shoulder. "Your quick thinking made a difference." Lyra beamed, proud to contribute. Around her, the Orinthians began to see humanity not as strange outsiders, but as partners, problem solvers who complemented their own skills. As the fleet prepared for its first coordinated movement, a challenge arose. Sensors detected a cluster of drifting asteroids nearby, likely remnants of an ancient collision. While small compared to the fleet, their unpredictable paths posed a serious risk. One miscalculation could damage ships still fragile from the previous disaster. Kale gathered both Orinthian and human officers for a planning session. "We need to navigate the asteroid field carefully," he said, pointing to the projected path on the view screen. "Any mistake could set us back days, or worse." Elias studied the map. "We can approach in a staggered formation. Humans will monitor real-time positions and Orinthians will adjust thrusters and shields. Together we can guide the fleet safely through." Commander Rena raised an eyebrow. "You trust humans with this maneuver?" Kale smiled faintly. "We have little choice. Their technology and adaptability are unmatched. We must trust their expertise, just as they trust ours." The fleet began its slow movement toward the asteroid cluster. Humans piloted scout ships ahead, analyzing every rock and projecting paths. Orinthian pilots followed the guidance, adjusting engines with precision. Crew members on all ships monitored shields, thrusters, and power levels, coordinating through constant communication. For hours, the fleet inched forward, dodging asteroids that threatened to collide. Lyra, on the bridge of a smaller vessel, called out directions learned from human training. "Adjust course 2 degrees starboard. Shields up on the left side. Steady, steady." The combined effort worked flawlessly. Not a single ship was damaged, and by the time the fleet cleared the cluster, a cheer rose from crews on every ship. Orinthians who had doubted humanity's methods now acknowledged the skill and patience that humans brought to every task. Kyle allowed himself a rare moment of pride. "This is more than repair," he said quietly to Rena. "It is cooperation. We are learning not only to survive, but to work together across differences." But the universe had more tests in store. A few days later, sensors picked up an unusual gravitational anomaly, a massive field that could pull smaller ships off course or interfere with navigation systems. While not immediately dangerous, it posed a significant challenge to the fleet's journey home. Elias gathered the engineering and navigation teams. "We need to think creatively," he said. "We cannot avoid this field completely, but we can use it to our advantage if we plan carefully." Orinthian officers exchanged skeptical glances. "Use a gravitational anomaly to our advantage?" one asked. "That is bold," Elias nodded. "It requires trust in calculations, coordination, and teamwork. But bold moves can save time and energy, and sometimes it is the only way forward." Lyra worked tirelessly with both human and Orinthian engineers, helping map trajectories and calculate adjustments. Orin guided her, proud to see her grow into a skilled problem solver. The hours passed quickly, filled with calculations, testing, and discussion. Mistakes were made, corrected, and refined until the plan was ready. The fleet advanced into the gravitational field. Shields hummed as engines adjusted constantly. Humans monitored energy outputs, Orinthians adjusted thrusters, and together they navigated the invisible currents of space. At times, a small ship would drift too close to a dangerous path. But quick thinking and cooperation saved the fleet from disaster. When the last ship cleared the field safely, a wave of relief and excitement swept through the fleet. Even the most skeptical Orinthians clapped for the humans, recognizing their ingenuity and calm precision under pressure. Kale called another council meeting that evening. "We have faced challenges together," he said, looking at the combined officers of both species. "We have navigated asteroids, repaired critical systems, and overcome natural obstacles. Our success is proof that together we are stronger than we ever were alone." Elias smiled at the praise, but he knew the work was far from done. "The journey ahead is still long," he said, "but we have proven that collaboration works. We can handle whatever comes next if we continue to trust one another." In the quieter moments, the crew began to share stories and customs. Humans learned about Orinthian history, their fleets, and their culture. Orinthians were curious about humanity, asking questions about Earth, their ships, and their technology. Bonds began to form, small friendships that bridged the gap between species. Lyra found herself learning human games, puzzles, and ways of thinking that challenged her usual perspective. She laughed more in these days than she had in months of isolation. Even Orion noticed the change. Perhaps this is what survival truly means, he said quietly to himself. Not just repairing ships, but repairing connections. Kyle, watching the crew from his bridge, felt a deep sense of optimism. Humanity had arrived not as conquerors, not as strangers, but as partners. Their skills, patience, and courage had not only repaired the fleet, but had restored hope. Yet Kale knew that this alliance was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown challenges and dangers. The fleet would need every ounce of skill, ingenuity, and trust to navigate what lay ahead. But for now, the Arinthians were no longer stranded. They had allies, friends, and a new understanding that together, anything was possible. As stars streaked past the fleet, Kyle allowed himself a rare smile. The silent armada, once trapped and helpless, now moved with purpose and hope. Against the odds, humanity had proven that courage, intelligence, and cooperation could change the fate of even the most desperate fleet. And so, the journey continued, not as isolated ships drifting in darkness, but as a united fleet learning, adapting, and facing the unknown with confidence and trust. The fleet moved steadily through the emptiness of space, engines humming in coordinated rhythm. For weeks, humans and Arinthians had worked side by side, repairing ships, recalculating courses, and navigating natural obstacles. Confidence had grown among the crews, and morale was higher than it had been since the fleet became stranded. But the universe is never without surprises. Sensors on the flagship picked up something unusual, a disturbance at the edge of the fleet's path. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily. The reading suggested a cluster of ships moving in formation, far more organized than any natural phenomenon. Their technology was alien, yet not like humanity's. The fleet watched nervously as the shadowed shape slowly approached. Admiral Kale, Commander Rena said, her tone tense. These are not friendly signals. They are approaching our fleet in a deliberate formation. I recommend caution. Kale studied the sensors, his mind calculating options. Do we know their intent? He asked. Not yet, the officer replied, but their approach suggests observation, not immediate aggression. Still, we should be prepared, Kyle nodded. Alert all crews. Continue all repairs, but be ready for any situation. On one of the smaller Arinthian ships, Lyra floated near a console, monitoring the sensor feeds. Her heart raced as the unknown ships drew closer. Orion, she whispered, who are they? Why are they following us? Orion's expression was serious. We do not know. That is why we must be cautious. But we have learned to trust our allies, and we must trust them now to act wisely. Meanwhile, Commander Elias convened a human Arinthian strategy session. We are being observed, he said, pointing at the sensor maps. Their movements are deliberate but not overtly hostile. That gives us an opportunity to respond calmly and show coordination. Panic will serve no purpose. The fleet prepared defensive measures, not weapons of destruction, but shields, navigation readiness, and contingency plans. Every ship in the combined fleet adjusted its energy outputs, ensuring engines could respond quickly if needed. Lyra helped monitor shield integrity, while human engineers recalibrated power systems to balance protection and efficiency. Hours passed as the Shadow fleet drew nearer. Then, an unexpected communication arrived, not via standard channels but through a pulse-based signal. The message was strange, incomprehensible at first. Humans and Arinthians worked together to decode it, analyzing patterns and frequencies. Finally, a meaning emerged. We observe. We test, we judge, Kale frowned. Test, judge? What could that mean? Elias stepped forward, his tone calm. It appears we are being evaluated. They may be curious about our fleet, or perhaps they are determining whether we are capable of cooperation or strength. Either way, we must act with integrity and skill. The Shadow fleet maintained its distance, circling but not advancing aggressively. Kale realized that this was an opportunity, not a threat. We will demonstrate that we are united, competent, and cooperative, he said. This is a challenge, yes, but also a chance to show that the Arinthians and humans can work together effectively. The fleet began a series of coordinated maneuvers, carefully navigating through a nearby asteroid belt. Each ship adjusted its position with precision, engines humming in harmony. The humans calculated optimal paths while Arinthians executed them with skill. Lyra communicated adjustments between vessels, her voice calm yet confident. The Shadow Fleet watched, maintaining formation, occasionally adjusting their position as if reacting to every move. The Arinthians and humans realized that their observers were testing not only their technical skills, but their teamwork, communication, and problem-solving under pressure. At one point, a smaller Arinthian vessel drifted slightly off course, pulled by an unexpected gravitational eddy. Lyra noticed immediately. "Adjust course 20 degrees port," she called. The human crew on board confirmed the correction and the ship responded, realigning safely. Elias nodded approvingly. "That's excellent. Quick thinking and coordination. That is exactly the kind of response that demonstrates competence." Kale watched the unfolding events from the flagship. The Shadow Fleet's presence was tense, yet it forced the combined fleet to operate at its best. Every crew member, human and Arinthian alike, performed their roles with precision, ingenuity, and calm determination. For the first time, Kale saw the potential of a truly united alliance, not just repairing ships, but creating a fleet capable of handling unknown challenges together. As the hours continued, the Shadow Fleet sent another signal. This time the message was clearer. "We are satisfied, proceed." A wave of relief passed through the combined crews. The unknown observers did not attack. Instead, they had tested the fleet and the result was acknowledgement. An unspoken respect for skill. "Cooperation and courage, Admiral," Commander Rena said, smiling faintly. "It seems we have passed their evaluation." Kale allowed himself a rare moment of pride. "Not just my fleet," he said, "but all of us. Humans and Arinthians working as one. That is what allowed us to succeed." Even Lyra felt a sense of accomplishment. She had played a small role in communicating and adjusting the fleet's movements, but it mattered. She realized that her ideas, combined with guidance from humans and experience from her fellow Arinthians, had contributed to the fleet's success. Over the following days, the combined fleet continued on its course. The Shadow Fleet maintained a distant presence for a while, observing but not interfering before gradually moving away. It was as if they had silently approved the humans and Arinthians, acknowledging their capabilities and cooperation. The experience left a lasting impression on the crews. The Arinthians began to see the humans not merely as helpers but as equals, partners who could match skill with ingenuity, patience with intelligence, and courage with calm determination. The bond between the two species strengthened, built not only on survival but on shared experience and trust. Kyle convened another council meeting. "We faced a challenge we did not fully understand," he said. "Yet we responded with skill, coordination, and calm. This is the essence of survival and cooperation. Let this experience remind us that together we can overcome even the unknown." Elias added, "Challenges will continue. Space is vast and the universe does not act according to our expectations. But what we have shown is that unity and collaboration are stronger than fear or isolation." The fleet settled into a rhythm once more. Repairs continued, navigation adjustments were made, and humans shared more knowledge with the Arinthians. Lessons learned during the Shadow test were applied immediately. Crew members communicated faster. Engineers double-checked calculations, and pilots maintained constant coordination. Even small moments of camaraderie became meaningful. Humans and Arinthians exchanged stories about their home worlds, shared meals, and discovered shared humor in unexpected situations. Lyra found herself laughing openly with her human teammates, enjoying games, puzzles, and conversations she had never experienced before. Orion watched her growth with quiet pride, realizing that this new generation would benefit from a collaboration he had never imagined possible. As the fleet continued its journey, Kale reflected on the past weeks. The stranded armada, once isolated and helpless, had survived a near disaster, repaired critical systems, and navigated challenges unknown to them before. They had passed a test from an unknown fleet, proving their unity and skill. And through it all, humanity had been a guiding force, calm, intelligent, and cooperative. For the first time, Kale truly believed that survival was not just about technology or power, but about trust, communication, and courage. Humanity had shown the Arinthians a new way to see the galaxy. Not as a place of competition, but as a space where cooperation and ingenuity could thrive. As stars streaked past the fleet once more, Kyle allowed himself a smile. The journey home was still long and many challenges awaited, but he knew that with humans by their side, the fleet could face whatever came next. Against the odds, they had proven that courage, intelligence, and cooperation could overcome fear and uncertainty. The silent armada had been tested, and now stronger, wiser, and united with humanity, it was ready to continue its journey through the stars. The combined fleet moved steadily through the star-filled expanse, engines humming in harmony. After weeks of repairs, training, and careful navigation, the Arinthians and humans had formed a true partnership. The once stranded armada now sailed with purpose and confidence. Even the youngest crew members like Lyra had grown in skill, courage, and understanding. Admiral Kale stood on the bridge of the flagship, looking at the fleet as it stretched across space. Every ship moved with precision, following calculated courses, yet each one carried a sense of independence and trust. Humans and Arinthians worked side by side, their cooperation seamless. What had begun as necessity had transformed into friendship and respect. "Kale," Commander Rena said, joining him at the observation deck, "it is remarkable. Look at them, the smaller ships, the scouts, even the cargo vessels. They move like a single organism." Kale nodded. "Yes, we are no longer a stranded fleet. We are a fleet united not only by circumstance but by choice, and we have humans to thank for much of that." The humans had become a familiar presence across every ship. Commander Elias and his team moved freely, offering advice, teaching new techniques, and sharing knowledge. Engineers collaborated on engine systems, medics assisted with life support, and navigators helped plot safer, more efficient courses through the stars. The Arinthians were no longer wary of them. They were inspired by their skill, patience, and unwavering calm. In the smaller vessels, Lyra floated with a human engineer, helping repair a damaged shield generator. "You've taught me so much," she said, tightening a connector. "I never thought our technology could be understood so quickly by outsiders." The human smiled. "It's not about being outsiders. It's about curiosity, careful observation, and willingness to try. You already knew your ships better than anyone. I just helped you see it differently." Orion, watching from a nearby console, nodded approvingly. "And that is exactly why cooperation works. Knowledge shared, respect given. That is more powerful than any engine." As the fleet continued its journey, sensors detected a distant star system, the Arinthian homeworld, glowing faintly in the distance. It had been weeks since the fleet had last communicated with their planet, and the prospect of returning filled the Arinthians with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would their leaders say? How would they explain the strange, powerful fleet of humans that had helped them survive? Kale called a fleet-wide assembly. Using communication channels, he broadcasted a message to every ship. "We are approaching our homeworld. Soon we will be among our own people, but before that we must recognize the efforts of those who made this possible. Humans and Arinthians have worked together, faced unknown challenges, and proven that unity is our greatest strength." The crews cheered. Lyra felt a lump in her throat, proud not only of what they had achieved but of the friendships formed along the way. Humans and Arinthians clapped, smiled, and exchanged gestures of mutual respect. When the fleet finally emerged from the distant space near the homeworld, the Arinthian planet shone like a jewel in the void. Cities gleamed under the light of its sun, and orbital stations twinkled with activity. Long-range sensors detected the fleet's arrival, and messages of surprise and curiosity began to arrive from the planet. Kale took a deep breath. "We are home," he said quietly, "and we have changed. Not only have we survived, but we have learned that strength comes from cooperation, courage, and understanding. The shadow of the past weeks, the drifting, the isolation, the unknown observers, was replaced by the bright promise of recognition and gratitude. The Arinthian people would soon see not only their fleet, but also the humans who had made this incredible rescue possible." As the flagship descended into the orbital station, Kale and Elias prepared for a formal introduction to Arinthian officials. They were met by high-ranking officers and civic leaders, all astonished by the scale and organization of the returned fleet. "You have returned," the council leader said, voice both relieved and curious. "And you are not alone." Kale gestured toward the humans. "These are our allies. They came when we were stranded when no one else would. They offered aid, knowledge, and cooperation. Without them, much of this fleet would have been lost. The council looked at the humans with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Elias stepped forward, bowing slightly. "We did not come to impress or to take credit," he said. "We came to help because helping is what we do. But seeing your fleet here, restored and strong, is enough." As Arinthians and humans spoke together, Lyra moved among the crew, helping coordinate supplies and sharing news. She marveled at how much had changed, how quickly trust and friendship could grow even between such different species. "Lyra," Orion said, smiling, "look at them. We started as strangers, yet now they are part of our fleet." "Part of our story," Lyra nodded. "And they taught us something important, Orion, that working together is stronger than working alone. That courage can come from helping others, not just protecting ourselves." In the weeks following the fleet's return, humans and Arinthians continued to collaborate. Trade agreements were discussed, cultural exchanges planned, and joint training programs established. Young Arinthians studied human technology, while humans learned about Arinthian navigation, strategy, and history. Bonds of friendship strengthened across ships, cities, and planets. Kyle often reflected on the journey. The fleet had been stranded, isolated, and facing what seemed like certain doom. Yet humanity had arrived, not with weapons but with cooperation, intelligence, and patience. They had guided the fleet through repairs, challenges, and even the test of the Shadow Fleet. Through it all, they had proven that the strength of a species is not measured only by technology or numbers, but by its willingness to help, to collaborate, and to act with courage when others cannot. Even the smallest moments held significance. Lyra and her human friend laughed as they shared stories of Earth games. Orion spent hours learning new methods of star mapping from human navigators. Kale held discussions with Elias about philosophy, strategy, and the meaning of cooperation. Every conversation strengthened the bond that had begun in the void. Finally, the day came when the fleet assembled in the orbit above the homeworld for a ceremonial welcome. Thousands of ships, both Arinthian and human, glimmered under the sun. Citizens on the planet below watched in awe, celebrating the safe return of their fleet. And above them, humans and Arinthians stood side by side, proof of what could be achieved when species work together rather than apart. Kale addressed the combined crews one final time before disbanding the assembly. "We have faced challenges we could not have imagined," he said. "We have been tested by space, by circumstance, and by unknown observers. But through it all we remained united. Humans and Arinthians have shown us that cooperation, courage, and trust are our greatest strengths. Let this bond guide us into the future." Elias stepped forward, smiling. "The journey was challenging, yes, but it also proved something important. We are stronger together. We have learned from each other. And we have shown that hope and courage can shine even in the darkest corners of space." Lyra looked around at her fleetmates, human and Arinthian alike, and felt a sense of pride, wonder, and gratitude. They had survived impossible odds, repaired a fleet, navigated unknown dangers, and forged bonds that would last a lifetime. As the Arinthian fleet settled into orbit, the humans prepared to return to their own vessels. Kale and Elias shared a final handshake, a gesture of mutual respect and friendship that spoke louder than words. "We will meet again," Kyle said firmly. Elias nodded. "We will, and next time we may face even greater challenges. But we will face them together." The fleets parted, human ships returning to their own paths, Arinthians reclaiming their home orbit. Yet the memory of their shared journey remained, proof that the courage to help, the willingness to collaborate, and the strength of unity could overcome isolation, fear, and uncertainty. For the first time in a long while, the Arinthians felt truly hopeful, not just for themselves but for the possibilities that lay ahead. Humanity had arrived when they were stranded. Humanity had shown them a new way to see the stars. And together, they had proven that no challenge was too great when allies acted as one. The Silent Armada had been reborn, not as a fleet alone, but as a fleet united with friends. And from that day forward, the Arinthians would remember that hope, courage, and cooperation could change the course of even the darkest journey.